Oh, hello, Studio 108 community. Thanks for stopping by and seeing me today. I'm here with Richard Gartner. He is a yoga teacher from the Pittsburgh area. Richard is Frameworks Yoga. He has all kinds of offerings on YouTube. He teaches in Pittsburgh at Schoolhouse Yoga. He teaches around the region at many different studios. But you'll find all of his work under that tagline of Frameworks Yoga. And I love it because the tagline itself, Richard, kind of encapsulates how I see you as a yoga teacher. And I'll tell you that we were talking behind your back, me and another student who's done a few things with you, a few workshops with you, and knows your style, adores you. She was the first one to sign up for our offerings in March. And she said, I love Richard because he's like an engineer and a poet.
Well, that's very, very kind words. Hopefully I can live up to those words.
Yeah,
And
but that kind of like frameworks is a great tag for that because it really is, you do have that mind's eye and that embodied understanding of yoga as a structural opportunity, and also yoga as yoga, which would be very poetic.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I do think the reason why I chose frameworks yoga is number one, because frameworks, like the word frameworks assumes that there's a context around what you're doing, which means like in the context of yoga, it's like, so why are we practicing? Like what frameworks are we working with? And the other reason I like it is because if I teach the frameworks of a discipline, then that the person who's thinking about that can then fill it with their own meaning. So it's not just me like saying do X because Y. It's like saying like here's some things to think about. And then every student, every person who attends a workshop can just kind of like put their own meaning and importance and kind of take away from it what is most relevant to them.
100%. I've been saying a lot lately, like we're here to have an experience. So you're providing the frameworks and you're saying like, you're here to have an experience. Here's your framework. What beautiful, content can you bring into that? So that's great.
Yeah. And so would you want to talk about the context of yin yoga then? What would you
Yeah.
like to hear?
Yeah, Richard is coming into to at the end of March to work with us in terms of yoga teachers and yoga students around yin yoga and the lymphatic system, about yin yoga and the power and the impact of rest. And like my question would be, Richard, like how come yin yoga is our most highly attended class of all of the classes? Kundalini yoga, warm gentle yoga, hot power yoga, all kinds of yoga, but the yin is packed every Monday and Thursday night. Tell me why.
I would say because I do want to talk about how like yin has a whole bunch of could have a whole bunch of contexts to it, but I think whenever you're tapping into the yin aspect of something, it's a really kind of beautiful and awe-inducing aspect of it. And it's not like really mechanical, it's really organic and weedy. And I think people have the opportunity to simply accept themselves for who they are much more in that class rather than persevere. Meaning like there's like an element and I'm not saying it's bad because I do hit and I run and I do a lot of powerful stuff as well. But that's like perseverance and endurance. And those are very young concepts. And so the concept of yin is settling and accepting and just kind of keep making space for yourself. And I think people are just more than anything else, people want space for themselves. And so I think any yin yoga is going to provide that space.
100%. And I feel like the culture is literally desperate for those kinds of experiences and not to impose meaning on what people are experiencing when they come here, but like definitely all of that inner space to color in the frameworks that you provide, because there's still a structure to that class. Like it's just really rich and permissive for that. Mm-hmm. Like really permissive. We need that.
Yeah, and that permissiveness in yin, and I of course I knew you were going to ask about yin, and for me, it's like I think yin yoga is becoming sort of like a one category class, and I kind of feel like it has so much potential to be like multi-category. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when we talk about yin and yang as elements, they always need a context. And so yin and yang, they're not absolutes, because there's always some yin and yang and yin. And one's always present in the other. And also you need a viewpoint to determine whether something is yin or yang. And I know that sounds very abstract, but I'll give an example. If we look at our heart, the organ of the heart versus the rib cage, the bones of our ribs. So is the heart yin or yang compared with the ribs? And if you think in terms of yang and yin, meaning like yang is superficial and yin is deep, well, then the heart is yin because it's deep inside the rib cage. And so the ribs are yang. But you can analyze it in a different context. And if you say yang is pulsating and moving and yin is relatively still, well, now it's the heart that you can say is yang. And the ribs are yin because, I mean, hopefully they'll never move too much. But the heart, hopefully it's like always moving. So,
and I was also thinking like the rib cage would be yang because it is structural. It has that active function. And the heart, like beyond its pump, the heart is your feeling, your essence.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it's kind of interesting
context.
Pulling that apart and dancing with it. That's like a really beautiful contemplation.
Yeah, and so thinking about, well, like yin under what context, I think most of what yin yoga is aiming for is, at least the way I learned it was ligaments versus myofascia, meaning like the thinner, drier ligamentous structure around your joints versus the musculature. So for an active power practice, you're engaging your muscles. And when you engage a muscle around the joint, you squeeze that joint and support that joint, right? So the passive ligamentous structure is actually loose because you're pulling the joint in and the muscle's keeping it stable. When you relax the musculature, you're then hanging off the joint capsule, and now you're actually stretching the ligaments. So that's yin. And I think, well, I'll just keep it to my, like the way I taught yin yoga for the longest time was exclusively in that context. Is, active practices are going to stretch muscle tissue, tendons, and then the yin practice, we relax into it and we just wait for tension to be applied to the ligaments. But recently, and I've it was like an aha moment a few years ago when I started teaching the lymphatics. I was like, so like lymphatics are yin to the circulatory system. So if I'm teaching lymphatic practices, that's also yin yoga. And so for me, it's like, I think that like rather than being like confusing, that actually opens up a whole bunch of avenues to what yin yoga could mean. And of course, like frameworks, now every teacher can decide what's important to them, like what's the most important aspect of yin to them for the class they're about to teach. And then of course, students can take away what's important to them as well. Beautiful.
Love that. Love that. And the science behind the lymphatic health, is there a little bit you can kind of throw at us? Like what would be the worm on the hook that says, snatch this? Snatch this. We're going to be good for you.
Yeah. Well, so if I can hopefully not bore you with some just the most fascinating things that I think about the lymphatic system. So I consider lymphatics to be yin relative to the circulatory system. And doing my reading, we as human beings have a circulatory system and a lymphatic system. Some animals, those are the same thing. Okay. And it's all open circulatory system. But for us, we have these two distinctions. But yet the blood fluid becomes lymph in our bodies. And then the lymph travels through the body, gets redeposited at the vena cava right above the heart, and becomes blood again.
Wow, did
So
not
it's
know that.
actually the same. So it's actually the same fluid. So like that yin yang symbol, it's like there is no more appropriate symbol to describe how these two systems are distinct and yet interact with one another and really are one another.
And inseparable. I know one of the teachers who teaches a lot of anatomy around here has this good old-fashioned foldable book, where like you open it up and the pages like accordion out, and it's the systems of the body, and she lays it across the floor, and it's like so fascinating to see everything kind of pulled out and laid out independent of each other. And it's the first book I'd ever seen that had a picture of the lymphatic system, that literally had the lymphatic channels and where they were concentrated and how they moved. And I was like, wow, like that's not in our 101 conversations. Like people don't always know that. So just that really, what a rich little tip you threw at us here. That's a worm on the end of the hook, Richard. Like to talk about how this fluid relates to the circulatory system and how the body yin and yang and circulates everything through itself in a really holistic manner. You can't really pull the lymphatic system out and put it on a different page in the circulatory system. They're really a part of each other.
Yeah, they're completely interdependent, and yet we can sort of look at the individual structures and say, okay, so what's good for our cardiac system? What's good for our lymphatic system? What's good for our nervous system? What's beautiful about that is that they will just impact, like a benefit to one is a benefit to all. Right. So, and yeah, I think the reason why like people kind of study the lymphatic system last is that it's a very, so it's like considered an open circulatory system. The lymph, after it comes out through the capillaries, it's then interstitial, which means it's the liquid between cells. And so this is a very like simplistic way to think about it, but you can imagine that like there's a lot of capillaries in our hand, for example. So that's where blood becomes lymph and becomes interstitial, and then the mission is to take that lymph back up the arm and to the vena cava, going through lymph nodes to get filtered and cleaned along the way, and get rid of viruses, bacteria, as well as metabolic. So it's sort of like our sanitation department, as well as having function against antibacterial and antiviral, and but it's like so decentralized, and there's no pump the way the circulatory system has a heart. The pump is us existing and moving around and moving. Right. And so, and
there you are back with that yang and yin movement to the yin.
Yeah. And so just like, yeah. And so just by the fact that we are moving and living and, practicing yoga, going for a walk, even just kind of like rolling around on the floor or something with a pet or something like that, everything we're doing is moving, is a moving lymph through the body. And we have to move about 3 liters of it per day. So when we are not moving, for example, like if we're sitting for a long period of time, people's feet start to get swollen, for example. That's because there's just this impediment to flow. And that's something, I'm not talking about people who've had surgeries or injuries where there's a break in the lymphatic channels and there's like edema and, like lymphedema or swelling or something. A perfectly healthy body can be a little bit swollen because we're not moving around enough.
Right. Or, so I'm thinking 3 liters is kind of a lot.
It is a lot.
How many liters of lymph do we actually have? Do you think we have 3 liters and it all needs to move through the system every day?
Yeah, the body moves about 3 liters in, and just as a comparison, there's about 5 liters of blood in the body.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's actually a pretty big part of our water system is actually in the lymph.
Interesting. Interesting. So we actually have a lot to do.
We do have a lot to do.
Lot to do. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
but
immune functioning is a #1 topic these days, like, you know, so this is really important to quality immune functioning. And I love that you listed so many really practical things about moving. So doing yoga is great, going for a run is great, rolling around on the floor with your dog, or just rolling around the floor because you decide I'm going to move my lymph today and I've got 3 liters to get done. Let me roll around a little bit. Let me go out and get the mail and walk. Let me take the stairs, you know, like just do really practical things to move.
yeah, and I always mention like rolling around because the way and this is like shop talk. So this is a little bit for teachers, but I think I think the average person could really see opportunities here too, is the way I design lymphatic sequences. Like normally we're like, okay, so what are we stretching, or what are we stabilizing, or what are we like aiming toward, like a peak pose or something. For me, the lymphatics rely on orientation changes and pressure. So like squeezing your armpits is really squeezing the axial lymph nodes, for example. So to bring your arms up and then to bring your arms down, that's the pressure of the axial nodes, and that's why I'm a big fan of like slow movements through the guts, because most of our lymphatic channels live. Most of the lymph nodes live in and around our guts. Mm-hmm. Like we have like 6 to 12 next to our jaw. We have about the same amount axially. We have about 12 to 20 on the inside leg, and we have hundreds wrapped around our abdominal organs. So a lot of it is just orientation changes and pressures into the abdomen and release, and pressure and release. So you see how if you
movement,
right, so movement. Yeah, and then just to go back to what I was talking about, how like all these are connected, that also happens to be good for peristalsis, moving food through the system. And it also happens to be really good for our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest system. So you know, like I said, I call it lymphatic, you know, yoga, like the yin lymphatic yoga, but really it's like tapping into several systems at once.
100%, 100%. And when you talk about just what's attractive about yin to people right now, and I took a call this morning from someone who we all have a story, and she had a story, and most of our stories point to the need to downregulate the nervous system, and then to do things like the lymphatic, planful lymphatic experiences that allow our body to access its own healing potential. So you're doing exercises, activities, movements that just allow the body to come to its own state of optimal health and well-being. It's like you just want to do the things that give your body a fighting chance for you, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily that this or that cures it, but this or that puts you in a position that you can be your best.
Yeah, and I always use the adjective vital and like the verb vitalize, mm-hmm. because number one, I mean, movement is vital to all of our systems, but like after doing some, you know, because like sometimes I'll go for a run, or I'll do, you know, heavy lifting or something like that, and I wouldn't quite say I feel vital after that. like that was not vitalizing. Mm-hmm. But after like a yin practice, be it like for the ligaments, or you know, just like a restorative practice, which, you know, is a little bit different from yin, but just like something quiet, I just feel so much better. Like I just feel more vital. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, like when you said that, like the biggest mission is to try to like down tempo our lives a little bit, you know, like shift gears and back off a little bit. The opportunities for that, even like a couple times a week, is amazing. So I can understand people are just like wanting to get a little bit of that, because there's permission, there's acceptance, and there's just this slowing down that actually makes people feel vital.
100%. And I mean, if we can, as a culture, temper some of the glorification of stress some of the glorification of, oh, I went to this workout, it was so hard, I was wiped out. It's like, did you want to be wiped out? Were you not already wiped out when you walked in? You know, like can we find things that are really supportive of our well-being, that let us feel vitality and joy and light as a feather? You know, I don't want to be wiped out, I want to be, you know, vibrant. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I hear that. And like I said, I do, and because like I said, I like to wipe out on a schedule, but I have in my life a built-in practice that like I'm not gonna keep on going for more and more and more and more and more.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's really what the Dalai Lama said, something that was just, it's just so I just think about it all the time. But he said, when you ask people, would they like to be stronger? Most would say yes. And to me, it's like that. What that means is that people aren't putting themselves into context, rather than like, am I strong enough?
Right.
You know, like how much is sufficient? And I forget where, if it's from a koan or a poem, but it's like from the Taoist tradition. It's like the greatest tragedy is not knowing what is sufficient.
Huge. Mm-hmm. And because it robs you of any sense of contentment and satisfaction, and that's a tragedy. Like to have a sense of balance in your life where, like you say, you plan your, oh, I'm so wiped out, and then you plan your, oh, I feel so revitalized. Like you have a plan that keeps you in balance, and then there's a sense of sufficiency, and there's a sense of satisfaction and contentment. But on either end of that spectrum, whether you're like the go type or the I just can't even get myself off the couch type, you know, you're going to be lacking that kind of satisfaction. And I have a paper in my office taped, and I have written in like smelly magic markers, it says, success is my own satisfaction. Like, how do I know I'm successful? How do I know I'm not on that hamster wheel, like always chasing the next thing without having a perspective that I'm successful, like I'm enough. I've done enough. I've worked enough. I've given enough. I've achieved enough. And it's, for me, it's like my success is the fact, am I content? Am I satisfied? Do I have that internal sense that it was a good day? It was just a good day.
Yeah. And I think that sufficiency, I mean, what I would say is any yin teacher is going to speak to that sufficiency in class. You know, like any yin teaching has to include, this is really enough.
Yeah.
You know, how much does it take to get my lymph move through my body? Not that much. You just have to do it regularly and you're fine. And, you know, like,
and actually what you have to do is not the other stuff that we always do of trying to be enough. And you were so good at weaving that into the teacher training I took with you, you know, so many years ago on yin. Like, I think we were in Jamestown, right? And just the yin attitude, like what is the attitude of yin? So yeah, keep going. Put us deep into that understanding of the yin attitude.
Yeah. And basically like the less tension in the body, the more all these systems are going to move, and especially the lymphatics. You know, if you are caught with tension in your jaw or in your neck, you're kind of you're squeezing the interstitial tissue, but then you're not letting it go, right? And so there's that lack of movement there. So it is really about just kind of letting things go for a little bit, and you have to believe that what you're doing is enough to let that go.
Right. Yeah. Well, those are my favorite nights here at the studio, because that's the attitude that we're able to share together, like a shared experience of, we're doing enough. We're not going to push the edges. We're going to be in a place with our body, with our shape, that allows us to stay really relaxed through all these areas. So I love it that you're coming to bring just another poetic embodiment of that attitude, and also like all of this real understanding about how it works in the physiology.
Yeah, thank you. And I do think that talking about this like coming down from like wanting more is also relevant to the art of rest workshop as well, because there's like what's great about sleep studies now, like there are so many sleep studies that talk about the benefits of getting enough sleep, but also kind of like what happens when you don't get enough sleep. And so that is great. But I think the downside to all that available information is now like getting a good night of sleep might be an anxiety producing phenomenon, which is of course like exactly like your entire world is riding on your night of sleep, like your entire existence, and that's not really conducive to sleep. So
so me though. That is so me. I'm always like, it's 9 o'clock and I'm not home yet. I'm not gonna
right,
sleep.
yeah, and because you're like, oh, I need to do this more. I need to do this more, right? And so I think I found a different way to approach it. That it like in that workshop, I'm just going to include the fact that like sleep doesn't need to be perfect, and conditions don't need to be perfect, and like not every night is going to be perfect. But if you just work with this sort of like yin acceptance of like sleeping patterns, you'll actually have a better time. Like you'll have a more restful night.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful reframe.
Yeah, and for like sleep, for example, like people wake up in the middle of the night and they're like, oh my God, I'm not be able to get back to sleep. And all of a sudden their adrenals go off once and then they're up for like 3 hours. But up until like the Industrial Revolution, there was always talk of like writings and people writers mentioned second sleep in like the Middle Ages, and people were like, what is going on here? And what they realized is that like people would like go to sleep like when the sun went down, and they would naturally just kind of get up at like 12:30, 1 o'clock, and they might even like go out to the pub or like get stuff done and then go back to sleep a couple hours later and wake up. There were no alarm clocks. There was no like 8-hour work, 8-hour play, 8-hour rest kind of, robber baron things things going on. Like this was pre-industrial. So people were just following their own like following their own intuition about when they needed to sleep. And so one sleep study that I read is like they put a group of people in these rooms, like no windows, no clocks, nothing to give them a sense of what time it was. And they could stay awake whenever they wanted. They can go to sleep whenever they wanted. And they got back, a lot of them got back to biphasic sleep.
Wow.
Which they slept for a while and they woke up and they like did something. They made food. They like read. They like, who knows what they did. And then they went back to sleep again.
I think I've heard something similar through the yogic traditions about second sleep. But it was getting up at 4 a.m. for sadhana, like for meditation and for prayer, that people would get up at 4 in those pre-dawn hours for sacred practices and then go back to sleep from like 6 to 8. So it's interesting
that's another example of the biphasic sleep pattern.
Yeah, it's another example of maybe where that weaves through history in ways that are interesting and worth considering and worth having some compassion for ourselves, right? Like it might, like we have a way of making a problem or pathologizing something that may or may not actually be a problem. Like if it works for you, stay off the screens. Those really wake your brain up a lot. But if you read a book for a couple hours and go back to sleep, like maybe that's just a nice personal habit and not necessarily a big problem.
Yeah, and those are the things that we're gonna talk about at the workshop, like how to like reframe it so that when you wake up at 1 o'clock, you don't say, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get my sleep. You can actually rephrase it, be like, ooh, I get to have a second sleep soon, like, or a third sleep. You know what I mean? It's because some people went biphasic, some people went polyphasic, and that's just like one of the ways that I've found that we can add this sort of yin element of acceptance to sleep, rather than like I'm gonna get the best night of sleep ever, and every night's gonna be better than the last, and be more, better, faster, stronger.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, like sleep is sufficient. Like your body knows. So if you if you just kind of like are open to the possibility that you could be up for 2 hours and then go back to sleep again, you know, that you might actually get a better overall experience overnight.
100%. Yeah. And, you know, the whole point too is like back to my definition of success, perhaps it's just, am I satisfied and at ease? So if I'm satisfied and at ease with my sleep patterns and everything, then probably my whole body is going to be in a better, healthier state of being than getting all stirred up about it. Yeah, I love that. Oh, I can't wait. I'm coming to both. Well, you know I would, but I'm coming to both workshops. I'm super excited. It's going to be really great. Okay, before you leave, anything cool about, I know you recently went to Columbia. Do you have anything cool about it that you
My
want to?
gosh. I mean, I'm not sure there's much to say on a podcast such as this, but it's more of like a travel podcast. But like, it was my first time in South America. Both Kristen and my first time in South America. Wonderful, intense. The cities are big and fast, and the food is great. It was just nice to get away. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love exploring cultures like that. It has everything to do with yoga, you know, and mostly
yeah.
people like they just want to be a fly on the wall. People just like to listen in. So I love it. I love watching your travels on your social media.
Maybe one thing, one of the most mind-blowing kind of facts about the Muisca people who were there before Cortez came over. So this was back probably like the 11th through 14th century, I think. But the Muisca people, the concept of time was a little bit different for them, where they saw the past as being in front of them.
Oh.
Because you can see it. And their concept of the future was behind them, where you couldn't see it. And we went to Chingaza National Park like at the beginning of Colombia, the beginning of our trip, and so I just spent a lot of my time in Colombia just with that concept of like, what I'm seeing here is actually the past.
That's fascinating.
It really just kind of changed how I looked at things. It made me a little calmer in a sense, that like things are not coming at me necessarily. They're actually like kind of going away from us, and something else is coming.
I love that.
So maybe that's a little. I know we talked about like some of the woo woo.
Exactly. That's a little
like, yeah, that's just my little offering of just like, oh my gosh, maybe I can sit with that for a couple of weeks or a meditation practice or something like that. So that was probably the thing that was just kind of permeating my trip.
Yeah, that's a super interesting perspective. And I love it when things like that, as I mull it over, like you said, and you know, you were like having experiences with that as the backdrop during your trip. It's like, how would that change my planning, my decision making, my appreciation of my experiences, and what is the past? Like, it's kind of cool to be looking at the past and not feeling like it's over, it's done with, it's out of there. It's like, no, I am of my past too. That's super cool. I love that. Yeah. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. All right, you guys. So Richard's going to be here March 26th and 27th. Am I correct? 26th or 27th?
Sunday, March 26th. Body is a Pond and the Art of Rest.
You can attend both. You can attend one or the other. Entirely up to you. You can find him. I'll put his website below on Frameworks Yoga. And also check him out on YouTube. He puts out weekly classes across a variety of practice styles. It's not all yin. He's a very intelligent teacher, framework style. He'll give you a structure that's safe, that's productive, and a really clear clinician about how he offers his classes, very intentional. And as you heard, also a little bit of a poet and a philosophy lover too. So you get it all, big package. Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you, Tracy. It was wonderful to be on your podcast again. Thank you for inviting me again, and I will see you at the end of March.
Absolutely. Take care, you guys. Thanks for following.